6:32, I'll call the meeting to order, regular meeting, Mount Holly Planning Commission, Tuesday, June 16. First item on the agenda, any changes to the agenda? I will note here that we're going to have a hard stop at 7:45. I don't think anybody will object.
I had one change. Between the minutes. I'm sorry.
Haven't gotten there
Not
yet.
there
Sorry.
yet, no. If there are no other changes to the agenda other than the meeting adjournment, we'll consider it approved. We'll move on to the minutes. Faith has distributed last meeting minutes. I assume Ron has some change.
6B, fourth line down. Commissioner Hunterman asked if there had been a request to change the current ordinance. John replied, no, and that should be in here. It just goes on about something else, but John did reply no.
I assume we should request the correction of the typo that
Yes,
in the next sentence
yes.
where it says cherry instead of chair.
Yeah.
I have a minor correction, I think, to the minutes. In 5B, the second sentence says this boundary line adjustment is of a 1.5 acre property which was previously subdivided, which to my mind implies that the 1.5 acres at issue was itself subdivided. I think what you mean is that it was the result of a prior subdivision.
Yes.
It's just,
Yeah.
it was not so much wrong as it was a little confusing.
Yeah, I mean, as you can tell, I summarised a lot of that discussion because it was
Yes,
just
yeah,
so
I
obscure
understand.
and nobody reading it would understand it.
That was the only thing that struck me as awkward.
Anything else? Is everyone in agreement with those changes? Seems fine. I mean, I don't have the original text, but
I'm fine.
Right.
yep, okay. Unanimous.
Steven's nodding
I
yes.
see nodding, so.
Yes, I didn't know I needed to vocalize.
All right,
Okay.
let's go on to Faith's report.
Okay, ECRs, Gjochen, I think.
What?
Geoghegan.
Yep, that's the one.
Gjochen?
Good
Anyway.
guess, I think.
Dawley Road, 60 by 30 foot single story home. After Mr. Guion had submitted this, he did ask me to call him, which I did, to clarify that the wastewater permit is still being sought, but it is being sought. And then
Sorry, the rest of the wastewater was for what?
for this single story family home.
Oh, it's a new one.
It's a new development. The only other one is Pakarainen. We're working on our names today. On Route 155, a 7 foot by 14 foot woodshed. The application stated that there was no part of the property was in a flood hazard area, but in fact the front portion of the house is in a flood hazard area. Although the applicant had helpfully included a drawing of where this woodshed was going to be, which fortunately is outside the flood hazard area. But I just wanted to highlight that as being one of the challenges with the way that the system works now, which I'm sure we're going to get onto, in the sense that I could have gone back to the applicant and said, please can you reapply or change this in the application so that it is factually correct. But given the information that I had, that seemed a little excessive. But if I had not received the information about the location of where this construction was, it would have led to a much longer discussion. I would have had to call them and say, you need to tell me where this is, where it fits on the property, to make sure that it's not, in fact, in a flood hazard area.
He didn't show that on his plot.
He did, which is why I did
Okay.
not need to call him.
Okay.
But this is the first time in more than a year that someone's actually put a sketch on the form.
Really?
Yes, because it's not required at present.
Okay.
That is
The form was
all I
changed
have.
about 2 years ago. And the sketch was not kept.
Well, there's nothing in the ordinance that remotely references the need to sketch
No,
anything.
there used to be a sketch
Yeah, I think when I applied, there was a
in the
sketch.
old days, and
But
then
there is no longer.
no longer required on this application.
Anything else?
No.
Okay.
Question though, you sent out something from, Christ, Belmont Road, like 2071 or something like that, where it was by the Star Lake.
Oh, yeah.
So it was
The-
within it's not within, I'm gonna call it flood zone, but that's not correct.
Yeah.
But is there a BCR on this thing? I don't remember ever seeing.
So let's
No,
just
this-
summarize for
They've been
everyone.
working on
Yeah,
it.
this-
Turns out it's the one where they took down the boathouse.
Yeah, I understand.
There's
Let
a
me just
concrete
give it-
pad there and
Yeah,
a
it's
mobile home.
Rasevich, who
Yeah.
I
Okay, I'll
spoke
just,
to.
for everyone's purposes, I'll just say, so we get, the planning, I signed up for notices from the state for permitting updates. The state doesn't send out, what they used to send us like paper copies, emails of, like CC'd us on lots of different things. They no longer do that. They have a very, very fancy subscription service for whatever notices you want from the state. Several years ago, maybe it was 5, I went in there and I just signed up for all of them within a 6.5 mile radius of this building. So it turns out I went back there last week just to double check it. They've added a whole lot of new categories, of course. So I went and signed up for those as well. So we now should get hopefully everything. But one of them that I happened to see last week, was it? And I forwarded to the commission, was a permitting notice relating to a property on Belmont Road. And I'll leave it to you to talk about anything else you found from that.
Yes, this is the property that we discussed 2 years ago, and as a result of that discussion, I spoke with the state shoreland permits person and wetlands permits coordinator, both of whom said permits would be required. Both of those permits would be required. I did receive also a notification because I had originally set this process in motion, and I apologise, I should have mentioned that.
Okay, so you got an independent notification from the
Yes.
state? Okay.
Yeah.
I would suggest that, and I think I said this to you in email, that going forward, you also do that sort of sign up for notifications through that bulletin service, but
The shorelands permit is currently under consideration. The wetlands permit is currently considered incomplete.
It's currently what?
Considered incomplete.
Thank you.
right, so
Now-
everyone knows that this is the property that has an existing foundation where there was some question on whether it could be built upon. Is that the one we're talking about?
It,
Yes, it hadn't existed.
There was
It
an
had, but they tore it
It
down
was,
and
but
put
they
a different
moved it.
concrete pad.
They
Oh,
backed it
really?
away.
Yes.
They backed it away from the lake about
Yeah.
8 feet.
So they had
There is a
they
foundation
had a
now.
grandfathered foundation, and then they disturbed it.
Yes.
Boy, they did not get very good advice from someone.
Well,
It was a boathouse, I believe.
Or whatever it was.
I would have wanted it backed away because there was about that much between the building and the water.
Well, yeah.
I would've
For
wanted it backed
what's a
up.
good design and what is one that you already have grandfather permitting are two different questions. But anyways,
And probably if they had worked with the state beforehand, they probably could have easily
Could have
got
saved
permission to
themselves some
move it-
grief.
Move it away
so
from
you're
the
on
lake.
top of both of those issues.
And that did have an existing septic and water.
Yeah, cool.
so.
And a second septic disposal area from another property on that property.
Yeah, but that's up next to the road,
Right,
Inside the fence.
yeah,
yeah,
which got destroyed once and had to be rebuilt.
yes. It's nice when a tractor drives over it.
Is there any update on the Sawyer Hill property where they said they would talk to the Act 250 coordinator?
No. I think now is the time for me to send a third message to Mr. Longobardo, and if he still is unable to confirm completely that he has been in touch with the coordinator, I will do so.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it does, as you've indicated last month, it is another one of those things where whether or not this board thinks there is value in updating our VCR ordinance, or whether the select board has that same belief, Faith probably could use it. So, a very unfortunate situation to be in, where you're approaching landowners like this. So it's very tricky. I think Faith has been able to navigate it with aplomb, but like it's not easy to be in that situation.
What's the AO responsibility for that property? I don't know.
Mr. Longobardo put in a BCR for a large addition on his property, and he described it as an extension of a former building for storage.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
He also originally in the application said it was a public building, but then crossed that out. So once construction was started, I received at least 2 questions about it. I contacted Mr. Longobardo and asked him A, if it was indeed a public building, and B, if he had spoken to the Act 250 coordinator, because I had also discovered that he is a licensed commercial producer of cannabis.
And that is what they're producing in the building to which this is attached?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, you know that how?
He's a licensed commercial producer.
Well, I know it's an inference, but like we
He
know
has
that
a license issued in
That's
his
the only
name.
building on the property, and
the license includes an address.
Yes, I do believe it does,
Oh,
but
okay.
also the listers have been to look at the property
Oh,
and
really?
confirmed.
Oh,
But-
okay.
and I
Well,
know
there you go.
someone,
The
I know
assessor.
someone who
Okay.
talked to the owners and wouldn't
Okay.
let.
And you also mentioned last month that you were responding to a citizen complaint about it.
Yes,
Or
or
inquiry.
an
yeah.
inquiry.
Okay.
So I did ask him, and he did tangentially confirm it's a public building, that he's working with the fire marshal on all of that regulation. And I asked again about Act 250, and he assured me that he was in touch with the coordinator and he would get back to me, but he has not. And the question at hand, well, there are several questions, but one that I would ask guidance if I ask for a judicial opinion is whether or not cannabis production is in fact an agricultural
I looked
exemption.
into it and it's unclear to me.
Yeah, there
That's all I can
are
say.
Wow.
2 different, I've seen 2 very different interpretations of the law. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's one where they're going to write the law. It's going to fall on one side or the other, depending on what the advantage is to the state's tax revenue, probably. Like, so if they, I mean, it's not something I think you could determine based on the facts. Like, it's not like
no, this would have to be an
tilling
opinion.
soil, like you can
Yeah,
tell.
this would have to be an opinion
Yeah,
from the Act 250 coordinator.
Right.
Is there, not to discourage you from contacting the owner, but is there any reason not to just check with the Act 250 coordinator to find out whether, the property owner has been in touch with her?
Well, as I say, the last communication from him was that he is in touch, but I have not, and he would get back to me once he had further details. He has not got back to me, so my approach will be to go back to him again and say, since I haven't heard from you, I will approach the
Sometimes
coordinator.
you need to close the loop to find out
Yeah,
where the
well,
truth lies.
Part of the way in which I'm having to deal with these things is to allow people to follow the rules which he himself says he wants to follow. So
Yeah, the effect, and I was just sort of being a little bit philosophical about this, but the role and the intent of all municipal permitting is for compliance, not for punitive measures. So we are always trying to get people to comply. However, I think, as Andy might be suggesting, sometimes the way to get them to comply is to move the ball down the road. So I think it's fair that you're giving him one more shot at it. That's fair.
I would warn him before doing so.
Yeah, right.
And
All
it-
right.
it is the AO's responsibility to monitor Act 250 in our town?
Not as a sort of blanket responsibility, but as one of having an obligation to ensure that all rules, regulations and ordinances, including those of the state, are followed.
But not the fire rules, you don't have to, you follow those. The state fire rules, you don't have to enforce those, right?
Well, she's
Well,
not
I am not the
enforcing anything.
enforcer.
No.
I am the person who tells people. Occasionally I get emails saying, I want to rent out my property, do I have to do anything? And one of the things that I'll tell them is that they need to get a state fire marshal.
I guess what I'm trying to do is see if there's less work for you, is what you've notified him. He now knows. And he's going to screw himself if he does something wrong. Act 250 will shut him down, I assume. So at what point can you pull back is what I'm trying to look over here.
Well, Act 250 won't shut them down unless they know about it. So,
Yeah, since I haven't informed the coordinator, and I have not yet got confirmation from him that he has informed the coordinator. Nothing is happening at the moment. But, as I said, if he, at the third time of asking, can't confirm that he has actually spoken to the coordinator, then I will tell him that I will do it myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a faith discretion in some sense here applies, because there is, I think in some people's view, an affirmative obligation to, when there is actual knowledge of a potential violation, whether or not we should be attempting to urge compliance, or whether or not silence is complicity or whatever. So it's Faith, I think, is doing a great job in navigating this. It's a very difficult position.
I would look at it a little differently, is that she's not trying to get compliant, she's trying to help the people get it done right.
Well, that's
Whatever
compliance with the law.
Whatever their
Same thing.
requirements may be,
Right.
with not necessarily having to enforce any specific rule. It's just keeping them from getting it bad, having a bad result, either through their stubbornness or ignorance.
I mean, mostly everybody has a bad day if it goes down the wrong path for too long, right? So, in my view, at least, is it's always in everyone's best interest to solve problems earlier than later.
And that's,
And that's,
Faith's being a good citizen.
yeah. Well, and a public servant, that's the role of the ZA in our town, the AO, their role is the eyes and the ears of both local and state regulators. The state does not put people, and I think we're all grateful for this. The state does not send people into towns looking for possible violations. You don't have to be something I don't think anybody would enjoy. That is I think, in my view, Faith may have her own view, but that is one of the responsibilities of the role. And it's one that can be onerous at times. All right, thank you. Anything else? I don't have a lot. There is, I think I sent this around maybe twice now. There's a land use training session, I think 2 days from now, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Held jointly by Rutland Regional Planning Commission and the Mountain Views, maybe, or one of the other planning
Yeah.
commissions.
And the other one forgot to send out a reminder because I did the first and I forgot the second. And I'm hoping that.
Oh, did I forget to send one out? I'm sorry. I thought I may not have sent it to you.
Once you'd registered, they should have sent a reminder.
Yeah, that would be smart. Yeah, yeah. And I believe they do have recordings. I think I sent the recording link around too. So if you're not able to make it this week, might be something that's worth looking at. I think this one is on implementation, if I'm not mistaken.
Regulation.
Okay, well, implementation of the plan or whatever. I don't think I have anything else. Have we received any other communication that I'm forgetting? I don't think so. Oh, I did have something else. The regional plan, as you may know, was adopted. Apparently by, what do they say, a hair's breadth or something, one vote or something. Because I got a text message that, I think we were here. I got a text message from the chair of the Regional Planning Commission saying, can you come in for the meeting and sign or to vote for the decision? But our rep did make it, I guess, at the very last minute. So
She was recorded as.
she was,
Yes.
I think it was her vote that put it over the top. So the regional plan is done, as far as I'm aware. I think that's it. We don't have Jeff here. Do you have anything for our wastewater committee? I don't think we do. Okay. All right. So we do have one thing I didn't put it on the agenda, but we'll just note it. We didn't get anything else from. It's graduation, so I think there's some partying happening. We didn't get anything from Mr. Seagordner yet.
No.
Okay. From development review, we had a sketch plan review last month, but we haven't heard any more. We should set a date, if possible, now for deliberation. I think this is a relatively kind of pro forma type of application. I think I could probably get a draft for you guys probably relatively soon, but I'd be happy to meet as soon as tomorrow. I have a block of time to talk about it. We can, we often do this at the end, but I thought I'd put it here just so we get it done. I have up until like say 7:30 tomorrow night. My parenting becomes much more complicated during the summer, so it's going to be a little. You may have to permit me to bring a +1. So.
I'm not available, but then I recuse myself from the
You're off the
assembly,
hook.
so-
You're off the hook. I mean, is anybody else available tomorrow evening?
Is this for the deliberation?
Deliberation. Yeah.
And we have to have a deliberation?
Well, we need.
Okay.
I mean, yes.
You can't set a Sunday
We
walk.
could. I mean, we could take 10 minutes if we close early tonight and talk about what we want to do.
It's fine with me.
We're probably all on. I'm guessing. I never can accurately predict, but I'm guessing we're probably similar of mind here on this one.
All right.
It's fine with me.
If there's time tonight, do it.
If I'm going to put up my cards on the table. If we don't have to meet, I'm totally okay with that. Because like I said, I'm squeezing things in between parenting right now. So.
Well,
If we can
what I
meet-
think Ron was about to suggest was if you're working on a draft, you could circulate the draft, and only if there's like issues that people want to discuss, then
That's exactly.
other than that, we wouldn't have to meet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we just may need to.
How about-
we need to
I have
How
the
about
same
this?
sense that you do. It's not
Understood,
that.
Yeah. How about we take 5 minutes after the conclusion of this meeting, make sure that my assumptions are correct, and then I can start writing something and then send it around by email, and then we
After
can
that.
all enjoy more sunlight on our own.
Sounds good.
All right. So I won't set a date now. We'll leave it at that. All right. So we have about 45 minutes at most. I wanted to put back on the agenda a continuation of our discussion around updating the BCR ordinance. I made an honest attempt to incorporate all of the feedback that was given at the last meeting, including the name, which I think works, including Ron's concerns, which I think are right, that expecting people to give vacation updates is not what we intend. Congratulations to, I'll say here, congratulations to the Mount Holly School seniors.
Class of 2026.
Class of 2026, Mount Holly School. Good work, guys. Which would be sixth graders. Actually, yeah, that may be where Jeff is right now, as a matter of fact. I was privileged to be able to sub for that class. It's a nice group of kids, the sixth grade. So let's go. Yeah, so I tried to address the temporary residence changes, and there are only, the intent now is, or was, but I think it's more clear, hopefully, that this would only pertain to changes in your legal residence, effectively. With the 182-day rule. I tried to reduce some of the redundancies that Stephen thought he disapproved of last time.
Do you have copies of what you're...
We do, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, they're on the drive, but if we need more, we can print them.
Thank you. Did you want one?
One of the other things that I don't think was exactly requested, but it was sort of like what I read between the lines, was like what are the uses, rather than trying to like reconstruct them from some like project definition or what have you. So I tried to just write them down. So this is potentially one of the biggest benefits of this whole thing, because what other towns have is they have exactly this kind of list identified in their zoning bylaw. We obviously do not want a zoning bylaw, but yet we have no way of defining what, and this is something that I've had, you probably had just similar discussions with David back when he was treasurer, that we have really no way of describing properties because we have no terminology.
Describing what?
Properties or uses. Most towns do. So, you know, there's very much what we're doing here is trying to like take any advantages from what towns get from zoning, but literally everything else is, and we just do not want zoning. So we want like the information component with no regulatory review. So you can see in the definitions, I've added, for discussion, categories of occupancy and use. And these are ones, especially occupancy, ones that I described last month as really being highly problematic for us in terms of our record keeping and information tracking, like with both how we proceed from our housing study, how we measure progress, but also in how we ask the state for funding going forward. These are targets and goals, especially with housing, that the state expects us to have. So for example, like in the regional plan, our own town plan, state legislation, we're expected to have housing targets, and we're expected to measure our progress against those. We really don't have any way to measure that. So this is one attempt at it. So let me think about what else was changed. Those are the big things. The forms, of course, were changed as well to reflect those changes. Oh, the naming. The naming, well, I mentioned the name of the thing altogether. I updated to use Jim's suggestion, but the name of the determination by faith I changed, or would be by faith, changed as well. So what did we call it? A certificate. I can't remember whose suggestion it was last month to use something like certificate. It might have been yours.
I don't know about the certificate. I just said something about the registration rather than,
You did the name.
I think I suggested that it might be called a certificate,
Okay.
but
Yeah,
it
sorry.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, somebody suggested it, and that's now represented here too. So, anyway, that's what changed, I think, in summary. Anybody have any starting thoughts on those changes, or whether they adequately address the concerns that were at least the initial concerns?
It still doesn't address what I call the fundamental concern, is does the town of Mount Holly, do the residents of Mount Holly and the select board first want a permit system? This is called a certificate, but it is a permit. And to collect information. There are some good reasons, you mentioned them, about making sure people don't build in wetlands and all, and helping them not to. That's one reason. The other reason is to collect information, like you said, like housing and demographics, land use, all of that's part of another objective. I still, and this legality issue, I asked, the idea that property owners can start work immediately upon submission is contrary to state law. I'd asked either you or Faith to show, is there a statute to that effect?
Yeah, there is. It's let's see. Is it 4410? It's in chapter 117. It's in the title. So the Land Use Act.
Because that's important. If there's something illegal, we should definitely solve
I
that.
mean, so we've been very careful about stating on the record that the current law violates the law, and I was sort of pressed into saying it last month. And it's fair, I guess we should acknowledge it. It is. It is both illegal in terms of its failure to, in my opinion, and in some other people who have reviewed it that have like more experience than I do. It violates the law in material ways, but it also does not have statutory authority. So, we do have the ability to have a permit process, but it's not really, the ordinance we have, it's not founded on, in my opinion, adequate authority. So,
The BCR isn't.
yeah. So I don't know what it would be if it wasn't a permit. We could call it a certificate. There's lots of different ways, but it's a transaction, right? So it's not really clear to me what the alternative is.
Or the registration. Other towns don't have permits, they have registrations, like we do. We're not the only town in the state that does this.
I don't know what any others may know that do.
I Googled, and there are other towns in the state that have just registrations. I have to look them up, just as you haven't given me the law, I have to go look them up, okay?
Well, so I'm not making any sort of legal determination whether they have an adequate basis for those ordinances or not. But I can tell you that Rutland determined that they did have one almost identical to ours, and they determined that it was not sufficient, and I believe that they were advised to update it. I don't think that the very idea of registration means that there's no handshaking. So when people have, we talked about this last month, like the registrations typically now are like short-term rental registrations. That you could call it something else, but it's a permit, right? So like there is nothing that I know of that is like a sort of fire and forget notice.
Except ours. The current one we have is.
Well, right, lawful. Right. I don't know of any lawful ordinance that
If we're gonna-
implements any sort of fire and forget obligation.
Well, I sort of agree with
Because I
you.
mean, it's not even an applicant, I don't even know what you call it.
Also, on the side, a short-term rental registration is not necessarily a permit, it's just a registration that you're doing it and you're complying with a checklist of things that have to be done.
I mean, it's exactly the same as.
But it's not a permit, it's not giving them permission to do it.
Oh, that's, of course it is.
No, it isn't.
No, you're wrong.
It's
John.
saying that they're complying with a checklist that they've got, the fire marshal that came in, they're having somebody within,
But could
15 minutes
Could
to
they do a
take care of it.
short-term rental without the registration?
It's a tax
Probably.
registration.
what it is the ordinance in the town, unless it limits, that ordinance is limit the number of short-term rentals, you don't need a permit, you just have to tell them this is what you're doing.
That's
And that
not-
you have done the following things,
That's
you
not
don't
what
get a
short-
permit back.
Okay, I've read short-term rent ordinance, I've read short-term rental ordinances.
But that's a minor point.
Everyone,
There are
okay,
bigger
let me-
issues here.
everyone I've ever read is whatever you might call it, a permitting process. The person is not permitted to short-term rent without the approval.
We don't have we don't have a short-term rental permit.
No, but this is the example
No,
that.
I'm just talking about like Ludlow.
Yeah, other towns, but we don't.
Right.
Yeah, we know that.
So it's not, well, I thought you said it's required.
No.
Steve,
He was saying
Steven's
short-term
arguing that short-term rentals aren't permits.
is a registration and not a
And
permit.
it's kind of irrelevant because we don't have short-term
That's right.
rental
Right.
registration. I think, if I may speak to what I perceive to be the broader question that Ron is raising. I think the responsibility of a planning commission in any town or city is to try to force, within the obvious limitations, try to foresee the future and plan for it in order to ensure that the town is prepared for changes and can thrive in the future. And I think it's our responsibility to put forward proposals that will help the town do that. And if we think, as I do, that gathering data that will help us understand what is happening in the town will aid the town in its preparation and in its understanding of what's going on and how to prepare for it, then I think that's good planning. Ron raises a separate question, I think, which is whether we call this a permit or a certificate or something else, do the citizens of this town want what we're proposing? I think my view on that, and I think this is what I heard John express at the last meeting, is it's not really our job. Anything we propose has to be adopted by the select board. And it's the select board's job as the representative of the residents to decide whether what we propose is good or bad or acceptable to the residents. Which is a perfectly valid and appropriate subject, but I don't think that's our job. Our job is to try to figure out what we think is good planning and what will help the town do good planning. And if we think this document or something like it will help us do good planning, then we should propose that or amend it to the point where we're comfortable with it. And then we propose it to the select board, and the select board can say, now we don't think the residents want this. The select board can say, maybe the residents would want this if you change this or change that and kick it back to us. But that's how I see our respective roles. And I think that without knowledge of what's happening in the town is kind of flying blind, or at least relying on, I'm not sure what the word is I'm looking for, but, just anecdotal, well, so-and-so sold this, or someone is building that, and A lot of times you don't really see patterns until you collected the data. And I see this as serving both the purposes that you described, Ron. One is to help residents identify things that they need to do legally before they get so far down the road that it becomes a hardship for them. So we're helping our residents that way. And it also helps the town by knowing what's going on. So that's, I hear the concern you're saying, Ron, but I see that concern as being the role of the select board to decide what is politically acceptable to the town, while our role is to try to put forward something that we think helps the town do good planning.
Yeah, thank you. I want to hold on one second. I want to hear. Did you have anything to respond to, Andy?
No, it's, I'm hearing some good information, some good questions, good answers. And it's, because I agree with some of what Andy has said, and I agree with some of what Ronnie has said.
We can ask questions.
But it's, you know, this can be carried, the thing I see is it can be carried too far.
Yeah. Where's the line for you?
That I haven't decided quite yet.
Can you give like an example of what you might think is too much? Just to kind of help understand where you are.
Well, I mean, you know, last week we were talking about land use and stuff like that, and disturbance of earth and so on. That's a little over the top. Because a farmer disturbs the earth every day. A logger disturbs the earth every day.
Those are good points. I think this draft addresses that. It excludes forestry, it excludes agricultural
But
activity.
that's why I say though, there's a point of going too far.
No, I agree.
That one, I think we all agree.
But
with that.
I think this draft, in my view, strikes the right balance. Maybe to some of you, it still goes too far, but I think the conversation has to be about finding a way that makes all of us comfortable that we've drawn the line in the right place.
And maybe I missed that. That may have been a change since the last draft that I failed to identify. But I do remember adding a whole lot more on the exceptions side, although
Yeah.
exemptions.
5D.
Is it 5? Yeah.
Yeah, 5B is exempt activities.
Tree removal is one. What if I cut 5 cords of wood? It's not tree removal per se from my view. I have to cut 5 or 10 cords of wood. Is that okay?
You know, I would, you know, I'd like to think so.
I would too.
Yeah, it doesn't
How about a
say
new stone
forestry.
wall? If I wanna go-
Well, or to heat your house.
That's why I'm cutting it. I
Yeah.
heat my house with it. I'm just picking a few
Yeah,
here.
sure. I mean,
Yeah,
silviculture,
I thought
forestry.
I saw-
I thought that was in.
I
here.
thought I saw agriculture and, well, farming is there.
I mean, I think just adding the
Gardening,
word
farming.
forestry would cover that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be somewhere else in here because I thought I remembered seeing that.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth
Under 4RD,
What's that?
it's above there, meaning use of farming, grazing, horticulture. Is that in the,
Yeah, it probably should just add. We should just add forestry.
forestry use, I mean, use of
silviculture. I mean, we'll add
forestry.
whatever other words we think are necessary. I mean, let's all be clear. We all live here. We all do more or less the same things. None of us want to be overburdened. Like that's not anyone's goal, right? I bet you I cut more wood off my land than any of you. So, I can guarantee it. So, that's the last thing I would want. And we're all like, I think we should agree.
your forestry use is under the principal function of the land use.
Oh, right, if it changes from a forestry plot to something else, yeah.
Timber protection.
But let me add one other thing I agree wholeheartedly with what Andy said. I think that, at least in my estimation, if we fail to do anything in the face of this housing and affordable issue, housing and affordability issue. In my view, we have failed the town.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
I'm Julie Parcells.
Hi.
Hi. Short-term rentals,
Yeah.
is this gonna be a part of this? Or, I know that in Ludlow, there are permits. And they're governed by the local and state bylaws, property-specific zoning.
So the way that this is drafted, this does not impose any requirements on short-term rentals other than disclosure, the same as any other use like of the property.
So is this a?
It's not the
new-
same as, it's not a short-term rental ordinance. No, that's kind of what we were batting around earlier. That is not something that
Because that's,
this
if you got a
aims to be.
short-term rental ordinance, that's when they're responsible for complying.
Yeah, that's ordinarily, there's, things like the public safety measures.
Local noise ordinance.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that are usually included there. And there's usually a fee structure for it, where the taxing and all, this is not that at all. Like, that's not the intention.
So
the intention is just to
Just
get-
to let you guys know, the town know who has an available rental unit, or is it, that's what the use is?
So there's a number of different reasons that we've stated for this. One of them is how we respond to our recent housing study and action plan, where it says like, hey, keep track of what the distribution between long-term rental, short-term rental, full-time residents, part-time seasonal ski residents, track those things, right? So that's what we've been sort of tasked with by the select board. We don't have the information for any of that today. We don't have the means to get it, right? So even the professionals that we paid sums of money to, and they worked over the course of several years, it was very difficult for them to get that information. And so one of the intentions here is to provide for people just to tell us, right? So like in most
Use the
towns.
tax billing for that, some of that?
No, unfortunately
For
not.
second homes?
No, I mean, you can sort of infer what are second homes from the grand list.
Homestead.
So,
Not homestead.
no, it's much, so
Really?
if David were here, rest in peace, he would be able to tell us.
Yeah.
He's told me many occasions. I've asked that very question of him for years because we've been trying to write grant applications.
You can't do a home, you can't claim a homestead unless you're living in it.
So there's a whole lot of variables in why the fields in the grand list and in the tax reporting to the state are not sufficient for us. The homestead does not give us adequate information. The seasonality doesn't give us enough information on whether or not it says like how many units. The listers don't keep that updated. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons that I'm not expert in, but I have an expert authority that no, we don't have that information simply through grand list reporting. So, and there's probably more that we've been there is more we've been asked to determine. Like I said, what is the distribution between short-term rental, long-term rental? Like, are we providing enough workforce for our fire department, for a school, for our local businesses, etc.? What's our trend? Like, are we Ludlow? Are we going to be Ludlow in 5 years? Or are we going to maintain a local population?
There.
Well, so it's all very much conjecture and
Sure.
anecdotal evidence now. People are like, oh, I feel like, we're really going this way. But we don't have the data. We don't really have the facts, right? So one of the things that we can't ask the state to pay us $30,000 to do a housing study every year. It's not going to happen. And we don't have a grant administrator willing to do that. I'll guarantee you that. The grant author, the study author said, you should just track this, right? Every year we have sort of I would say targets that we should meet. Like, do we have enough of this kind of housing? Do we have enough of this kind of housing? And how are we doing with the affordability? Like, and is building new housing, should we do that, making any impact, right, on our tax bills?
So with all of
You
this,
know, that's all data. It's all requires data, and we just don't have it. And the thing is,
are you
most
looking,
towns do.
are you looking to get short-term rental,
sorry, say that again if you.
short-term rental requirements? Are you looking to have one of those registration in the town of Mount Holly?
I have no idea what the select board is interested. I don't believe this board has ever discussed.
But I'm just
Yeah.
looking at some of the stuff that I'm
That's not what
reading
this
here.
contemplates.
No, not at all.
This just wants to know whether you're renting it out short term.
No, I understand that, but do you feel that this is gonna come up as a, well, now that we got this, so why don't we go to a short-term rental?
If I would say that if the select board, and that's probably one where either this board would have to do some long-term thinking, or the select board would have to just on their own ask us to, that would be a totally standalone ordinance, in my opinion. It would not be connected to this one at all. It would probably be, it would get information from this potentially. Like, so the way I view it, my personal view, is that this is like your baseline of information that would like feed other things. Like, so as an example,
That, you
we
just
could
answered my
we could
question.
hopefully streamline our subdivision applications if we already have some of this information from applicants, right? So if we get information through, we'll just as a shorthand call this the new BCR. We don't know what the name is, if it even goes that far. But if the BCR information provides X, Y, and Z, we don't have to ask that again when they apply for a flood area permit or a subdivision permit or anything else. And the anything else could be, if the select board wants it to be,
Yeah.
a short-term rental ordinance, right? So it could inherit information from this. But this is truly, at least as the person who drafted this version, my intention is for it to only provide information. There's no, like, you can't do that, like finger wagging at all. It's tell us what you're doing so that we don't have to spend Faith's time playing, Jacques Clouseau, whatever, like trying to poke around your property. Like, no one wants, little fingers of the town poking in their business. In my view, it's much cleaner, it's much more egalitarian, democratic for everyone just to say, okay, here's what I'm doing. Here's the status of my ownership. And then the town says, okay, if that's true, then here, I'm gonna help you. You're gonna need to go talk to this person at the state, right? But what we have now is, it's all like smoke and mirrors. Nobody knows what's going on. Faith spends months trying to get emails from people. And then we end up like somebody builds something and then we have to have a really hard conversation about, oh my gosh, do you have to like undo what you did because you didn't get state approval or you didn't get town approval? Or, and another analogy is the select board has come to us in the past and said, hey, what's going on with such and such a property? And I'll just say, like, one of those examples was like trailer parks. The select board came to us and said, what's going on with trailer parks? And we said, I don't know.
Do we have one?
Yeah. So,
Oh, yeah.
and we say, we have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, we do have one.
We have no idea, right? And, Faith says, I don't have any idea. And then that's that.
It's a campground, by the way.
Well, whatever you want to call it. So, that's my view. It's not the view. This board hasn't taken a position on those things, but I'm trying to answer your question from my.
Thank you, you did.
And just to clarify, this would only be triggered, as the current system is, if someone wants to change something.
Yeah.
It's not as if
Well, that's what
Everything
this
would
is.
be-
That's
It's not like
that's-
everyone has to come in.
Yeah, there's not.
It's not gonna be like day one, everybody's gonna have to file.
Baseline.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think you were thinking of Inspector Clouseau rather than Jacques Cousteau. Two very different things.
Oh yeah, did I say Jacques Cousteau?
Yeah.
Landing on
That's
18th Street
hilarious.
diving.
Yeah.
But I was actually thinking of the other.
Thank
one.
you
I couldn't think
very
of
much.
his name.
I would also just address one thing. The current BCR lets people, implied, it lets people start working without us stepping in. But the BCR does clearly state you may not begin until you have permits. And in addition, it lists permits, and we could,
Your ordinance doesn't, I'm just gonna stop, because you're reading, let's be clear, you're reading from our forms or from the ordinance?
Both.
What does the ordinance say?
it's broad. The ordinance says registration will ensure that new construction will be added to the grand list. That was what it was for. The form though says,
But the point was,
does it say
what does it say about beginning?
about whether you can begin or not?
I don't know what it's, I don't see
It's
it.
right at the end.
I think it's the last sentence.
The select board may, fine, a non-registered will exist whenever construction or installation has begun before filing the registration form.
Right.
So it's a violation if you don't file. So it is in here, isn't it?
No, if I came in here at 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. and I'd started work at 9 a.m., theoretically that would be a violation.
If it could be proven.
If it could be proven. But if I came in at 4 p.m. and started work at 4:01 p.m., it wouldn't be a violation.
Which is in violation of state law.
Again, I'd like to see that. One of the things, and I read this, and this permits is in here, and it says things like, is any part of your property located in the flood hazard area? If yes, have you applied for? We should change that. If yes, do you have a flood hazard river permit? If they check no, if no, you may not start construction. We could make it clear that we're not giving permission in this form, by changing this form.
You want to take that one?
Let you.
You sure?
Well, can I just, the form is merely an instrument to implement the bylaw or the ordinance. And if you don't have the backing of the ordinance, then someone, as happened today, could just say something which is
F
completely
you.
wrong on the form.
Or F you?
We can change the ordinance
And
then.
we have,
Well, that's what we're proposing to do.
No, we're not changing it. We're not changing a one-page ordinance. We're creating a permit. We're not changing this registration ordinance. I'm saying I could put 2 sentences in here and do whatever you want done.
I don't believe that.
But we'd have to get our town attorney to do it, I guess, to see if it's possible. That's my point, is I think if we really want to edit a registration system, we could do it and cover protecting our citizens. For example, they better not be building in a flood zone, and let's tell them that. They are not permitted. This form does not permit you to, or if you're a public building, if you don't have a fire marshal's permit, we would say the same thing. So I think there are ways to help, is one of the points, our citizens by giving them fair warning and not blanket approval. This is different. This is as you said, and you said it very articulately, this is a chance for us to collect data, even to let the town know if I move to Florida, I've got to tell them I moved to Florida more than 182 days. It's an interesting, I know it's a piece of information that
But
maybe
you already do have to tell the state.
I have to tell the registrar of voting I do.
So let's just, instead of straw man, let's just be clear. So what is the objection? You do have an obligation to inform the state.
I don't
You're
think-
objecting, no, can I finish? So you're objecting to telling your local town because it might help them, because you already have an obligation to tell the state, right? Do you agree with that?
I have an obligation to tell the town, not the state, the voting record, the voting rolls. I have an obligation to tell them.
So you don't think you have an obligation to inform the state on whether or not you reside in that state?
No, I don't think
So
so.
that with your tax filings.
Yeah, you do your tax filing, your car registration.
So in your state taxes,
Yep.
Are you saying that you do not have an obligation to inform the state on where you reside?
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in agreement. Okay,
So the question is, why do you object? to
so you are therefore in agreement that you would.
Tax return,
So but-
like what
but-
you
but-
claim
but-
on the tax return. Are you a full-time resident? Are you
Okay, so we are now all
Where
in
do you
agreement.
reside?
Let me finish, please. We are now all in agreement that every citizen has an obligation to inform the state where they reside.
No.
We agree.
No.
One
If I don't
second.
file taxes, I may not have enough income, I may not file state income taxes. This is just one example, and your point is the best, you made the best point there is. Well, before I get to it, I just want to say, this no longer has a $1,000 number, right? So anything we do in town, stone wall that I'm gonna build, I've got to come to faith.
No, it's literally on there as an exemption.
No, it's not.
Yes, it
There's minor landscaping. I'm gonna have Jeb Porter build me a $15,000 stone wall. I don't consider that minor.
Ron, I understand your point. The point I'm trying to make is, if you don't think the exemptions are adequate, let's talk about making them better. But that's not an excuse for saying we shouldn't do this at all.
No, the problem with exemptions is you never know every one of them. That's the nature of exemptions, right? The negative arguments are very difficult to make. Let me just finish a couple of things. We talk about how much work Faith has. Holy shit. All of this is going to come to Faith now. Every time someone does something, and there's record keeping in here, I notice there's a records section. Faith has to keep records, write us back, file those records. So I think whatever number of BCRs you get now, 2 to 3 a month, whatever, 5, whatever it is, there'll be a lot more, quote, BCRs coming at you that you have to respond to and keep tabs on.
Let's ask her what she thinks about it.
No, that's what your forum
No,
president
no,
says.
the question is, how does it Faith feel about that obligation? Let's ask.
Well, I certainly think that there's a need for a bit more rigour in how we keep all of these records, and I'm sure that there are systems that could be established, databases and so on and so forth, which we don't keep now, to get all this data in a more orderly format. At the moment, the main time that is taken up is when people don't give me the information I need to be able to tell whether or not they are in contravention of state law mainly, or even the town's flood hazard code. That's the thing that takes my time. It's, you know, chasing up all these emails to people who don't necessarily want to be frank and honest about what they're doing.
And finally, your point,
gonna be a database.
the benefits, and you state that well. I think what it comes down to is benefits versus burden. You know, that cost analysis, and do the benefits outweigh the burden to the town resident, our town residents, who now are going to have to be filing. There's a lot of stuff in here. You know, whether it's that stone wall or not, or whether I move, I have to tell somebody.
Well, let's again, instead of straw, let's talk about practical and direct consequences.
All right.
So we have, you, I think, have probably our latest BCR form.
Yep.
Your contention is that it is like an order of magnitude or maybe a factor of a multiplier by more difficult to do this than that. Is that what you're saying?
Doing the
Your
certificate.
argument was the burden versus the
Yeah.
risk, burden versus reward or benefit.
So I should add to the burden and
of
privacy.
this-
And privacy.
Okay, well, that's
Two things.
different. But what's the first point was that this is overly burdensome. And I think it's nearly identical to the current BCR, except
Not even close.
the one
Not
thing
even close.
Let me
is,
finish.
yeah, just all of these interruptions, amazing.
You interrupt us too, John, so
Yeah, and.
So you're both out of,
and
hold on, you're
when
both
I
out of
asked-
order. You're both out of order.
yes,
When I
Mr.
asked to
Chairman.
speak, you went to everybody else but
You're
me.
both out of order. Okay, thank you. It is the intention that these forms are no more onerous than the existing ones. Whether that aim has been achieved is arguable, and it's something that we could work through with good faith. But I think that it is clearly in the benefit of the town to have a form that has legal authority so that the town isn't sued for what's being asked. So as long as we've gone there, what we're asking for in our current BCR form is not justified by the ordinance. Is that a practical concern for the town? In my estimation, with 6 years of experience running this chair, as chair of this board, yes, it absolutely is a serious concern for the town to have something that is not backed by legal authority. So there's maybe 10 minutes left. I don't know whether we should look at the comparison of the two forms or whether there's much point in continuing this, as we seem to have a pretty stark difference of opinion, at least between some of us. Do you have any thoughts on where a possible constructive path forward might be?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
You? Yes. I think the form that you've tried to create here and the ordinance you've tried to create here is an extreme overreach as to what you just said. If you're trying to take care of that you don't start work before everything's authorized, if you give documentation as accurately and as fairly as you can, that you pre-notify us of construction within the certain requirements, that can be done in this. Asking where the housing, what the land's been used for, what it's going to be used for, please let's advise us every time you make a change in the use of your land so that it then has to be reviewed. There are other ways to do that by doing a separate ordinance that addresses that, rather than trying to cover 16, many things in this ordinance. Also, the ordinance itself, you're talking, they only do it when they're basically filing a BCR, which maybe is 100 a year out of 1,600 houses. So you're not really gathering the information. You would be better off if you were to write a separate ordinance saying, or something to the effect, or even doing a voluntary annual study gathering what you're using your property for so that we better can track and monitor it. I admit when you do a study, hopefully you would get maybe 60% of the people to respond, because you're not going to get 100, but unless you want to try and do an ordinance to require it. But it would be a separate ordinance from this. The way it's written presently, I would vote against it the way it's written now because it's an overreach. You're trying to do too many things with an ordinance. If you're going to do a BCR, do a BCR. If you want to do a housing study, do a housing study. If you want to understand short-term, that's part of the housing study, really. And if that would be ultimately lead to a short-term rental ordinance, so be it. But that's got nothing to do with the BCR on what I want to do in construction.
Well, personally, I think doing a study every year is impractical and in some ways more intrusive if you're asking questions of people who aren't making any changes to their property or their use of it. And
well, then just have them do it annually with a change, update.
Annually with a change.
In other words, we're sending out the request if we're doing a study every year, and if there's no changes from last year, you don't have to submit anything.
Well, the people aren't.
There's ways around it.
But the way to make sure that people actually respond to that is when they're proposing to make the change, if they understand that they need to provide this information before they make the change. And that way you get 100% compliance. And to me, I hear what both you guys are saying. Having two ordinances to accomplish two things, in my mind, is not better than having one ordinance that accomplishes two things. I think the concern I've heard raised is that this document asks people to, for lack of a better word, report too many kinds of changes. And I think the way to address that is not by scrapping this or having two ordinances or doing surveys, but to look at what is exempted, what is not exempted, and tailor it to collect the information that we all feel is appropriate to obtain in order for the town to do appropriate planning.
I understand that, but that's two different goals.
I think it's okay for one ordinance to have two different goals.
Could I also,
Because
what
it's too
Steve just
broad.
said something very important. He said this will only bring in 100 maximum, right, VCRs?
Yeah.
So all of the data that we want from 1,450 residences or homes, no, 1,150 homes, it'll take 10 years before, some people will never submit it. We'll never get data on many properties. So it is actually by itself going to achieve that.
Ron, are you advocating that we ask every person in the town how they're using the property?
No, I'm not. Well, I don't agree with what Steve just said. I don't, I know, I think privacy is another issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not going to accomplish the goal that we're trying to, that's in here when we're defining all this housing stuff, which honestly has nothing to do with the construction.
Well, I mean,
In other words, we're trying to make an ordinance do too many things.
so as the person who wrote basically every grant application this town has submitted for 6 years, I can tell you that it does do those things. So Jeff and I spent countless hours trying to bootstrap the information that we included in those grant applications. And you may say, well, what difference does grant application mean? Well, if you don't write grant applications, you throw away millions of state dollars. The state has extraordinary amounts of resources available to local communities. They do not give it out. You have to do all the pulling of the little levers and
I write them also.
dancing monkey
I know.
thing.
I write grant
The way you do that is by unlocking it, right? So the way we unlock those monies, because the state is, the power of the purse is very powerful. They want us tracking this stuff. They want to know how we're doing toward the housing goals. The governor does and the legislature does. So they want to condition approval of that release of those monies to us doing it, right? That's very, very difficult for us. We are at a disadvantage compared to almost every other community in the state because we don't track this information, right? Ludlow knows it. Everyone else knows it. I hope that you all, as time goes on, will look into it more broadly and see maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but we'll understand the wisdom in this. That this is not asking for more information than is needed. It is asking for the minimum, and it allows us to bootstrap to complete data. So the advantage of doing things on changes is that you don't overly burden the town. You don't overly burden individuals. You keep track of things and you build up a data set. But the most important things actually are the changes. We have a baseline set of information through the housing study, through the town plan, through all the work we've done with mapping, through the E911 database, and I can go on. But we actually have a fairly sophisticated baseline set of information. But what we need going forward, and what the action plan of the housing study says very specifically, is now we need to track how we diverge from that baseline, how we grow, how we shrink, how we use that information to plan going forward. Because right now, if we don't, we'll have a stale data product. And this has been the problem with a lot of our planning initiatives in the past, is that once we have a housing study or any kind of study, if you don't monitor things that happen afterwards, it's completely stale in a year. It's almost worthless. I hope that doesn't happen, and that's one of the reasons why the action plan was so specific about keeping track of that information going forward. This is one way to do it. I think, in my personal opinion, although I don't know if I'll be the one to carry this forward, this is the least imposing way to do it. There are many, many other more imposing ways, and I believe that the ways you've identified, I think, would be roundly rejected by the community. I don't think those would be very effective, actually. So, yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
If I want to right now add on to my garage, okay, I'm not gonna get approval to do it. I'm gonna ask Jim to add on the dimensions that I wanna add on. So I'll come down and I'll fill out this form and say, I'm gonna add on to my garage, but I'm not gonna ask permission to do it.
So is the question in what would it look like in the proposed ordinance or today? What is?
Well, it's kind of implying that I have to have it approved.
So in the theoretical future, if we'd be looking at this draft ordinance, the way it would work is almost identical to how you would do it today with the BCR, with one exception. And that Faith would be allowed to go check and make sure you didn't need to do any other permitting with the state before the construction began. And in my view, that actually benefits you because and the contractor, because it allows some reassurance that you're not going to get in trouble.
I don't think I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm not in a river corridor.
Well,
and
you may be fairly certain of that, but
I know I'm
most
not.
people, okay, most people aren't. As we
But-
heard tonight, where there was an example of someone who didn't know they were actually in a flood hazard area. So I think you may be much more well versed in all of the local permitting and the state and everything than most people. You know, the fact that you are even aware, come to select, I know you're a regular at select board meetings, you understand how government works. And nothing against most people, but most people are busy and they don't have time to keep track of all the local rules, right?
But
and
I
that's
don't
what
think-
Faith can do, is can help people.
I don't think you should be saying that somebody has to be approved, in my case, to add on to my garage. I'm
But
not gonna
John isn't
wait.
saying
How
that.
do you differentiate? I disagree with you.
Hold on one
because-
second, Andy wants to try to
All right.
clarify something I said.
I think John's point was that you wouldn't really do anything different under the proposed ordinance than you do today. And the difference would be that if you were someone who was building in a river corridor or an area prone to flooding, but didn't know it, that person would benefit because Faith would make them aware of that and what they need to do. But it wouldn't require you to do anything more than what you do today, which is to come in or send in a form that says, this is what I'm doing.
But what her objection is, she can't start work until Faith is signed off on the form. And the rationale for that, because I disagree with her argument, is that it's for her protection. She might be the exception to the rule to understand everything, but that you can't say everybody else has to wait for Faith to approve it, but you are the exception and you don't have to wait for her. And, and then who else is the exception? So it would have to be, everybody has to follow the same rules, no matter how you slice and dice it. And, Faith would get back to you reasonably quickly.
Can we refer to the administrative officer?
Okay. All right, the AO, whoever she may be at the time. For the general public's protection is checking to make sure all the boxes, statewide in particular, have been covered prior to the work starting. And, there are people that, know it inside and out and probably can, wouldn't have a problem. But there are enough people that don't know and need a little hand holding, if you will, for lack of a better word. And, part of the job of the AO is to keep you out of trouble. And so, as long as you do a little planning ahead, my presumption, again, it's a presumption, is the AO within a few days or a week would be able to get back to you and say, yeah, go ahead. it just requires a little pre-planning, I'll learn English, and submit the appropriate form and have it, yes, everything's covered, party hardy.
What if I don't want somebody on my property?
I don't think
Doesn't
Faith
necessarily-
typically,
they would
It
come
doesn't usually involve a
Yeah.
visit to properties.
most of, I would say, very, very few exceptions. But one thing, and I'll sort of, as someone who does contract work, I can say, at least from my point of view, maybe Jim has a different view, it's often nice for a contractor to have that reassurance that they're not doing something that they're going to get in trouble for. Because most contractors don't go out and check permitting like around here, right? You just start, you're asked to do something, you do it, and hopefully there's a paycheck at the end of it. It's nice, it's a nice thing if the homeowner has this process where that contractor can know that at least someone checked things out before work had begun. So that is one of the things that, for example, Dennis has often raised with me on why many commercial contractors prefer working in zoning towns, right? Is that they like I can start work, right? There's a paper that says I'm good to go, right? So we do not want all of the other stuff that comes along with zoning. No one has expressed any interest in that, but there is something from a builder point of view in getting an okay from an administrative officer to go ahead. I will tell you that. So, in my view, we've tried really hard, I've tried personally, to strike a very fine line between getting information and not imposing any of the kind of governmental intervention that we don't think we want here, right? Most towns, let's just be clear, most towns do have to do all of these permitting steps well ahead of any construction, right? That's not what we're proposing here. There's no substantive review to what Faith would do. You wouldn't even have to necessarily submit, I don't know, it'd probably be up to her, but submit plans. It's not like that, right? You don't have to say, she's not gonna be like, oh, well, that looks like it might be too close to no. There's an it's expressly prohibited from doing that, right? Faith does not get to say, in my determination that that's too close to the neighbor, or all the other zonings, you know what I mean? All the other zoning stuff we don't want, that's not present here. What is present is, I'm gonna change something significant with my property that the town has an interest in knowing. And where we draw the line and what is significant is something we've pushed and pulled on here. I think, Andy has eloquently stated that let's work on that line. But it's clear, I think, to everyone who pays attention, that knowing some baseline information about your own town enables you to do the planning that we need to do to address our housing problems, to address our capacity issues, to address building a strong community for the future. All right, so I hope that's something we can all agree on. I'm not entirely sure of it, but that's my hope. So it will be, I think, the task of this board and the select board to figure out how to thread the needle on that. I don't have an answer today, but we'll continue the discussion next month. I'm gonna let Faith have the final word, unless Julie, you had another question?
No, thank you.
Faith,
Sure.
any final thoughts on the possible benefits to you before we end the meeting?
No, I think I've made
Just
my
so-
position clear, and I think you probably understand that I agree that there is benefit to having a clearer basis on which a legal basis on which I could act, and something that would back the administrative officer up where there are, as we've heard, sometimes contentious issues. The one other little point I would make is the earlier example we were talking about on Belmont Road. Amongst other things, the applicant is currently, I believe, at least $9,000 in fees because of this simple act of moving his foundation by 3 feet, which could have been saved if perhaps they'd consulted beforehand. And that's not including all the other technical consulting fees that they're having to pay to get this process through. So just a thought.
Who's in Belmont?
The house
Are we gonna
down by the lake.
adjourn and
yeah.
have time to do a 5-minute meeting?
Yeah, let's do. That's why I want to try to make sure I do
Okay.
have another 5 minutes. So let's just set the next meeting, and I think then we'll be done with the regular meeting for today, unless there's anything else. Where are we? Today is the 16th. We're looking at
14th.
July
It's July the 21st.
21st, yeah.
Everything's a bit late in July.
Okay. Anything else for today before we end the meeting? Any other public comments on anything, even on other subjects? No? Okay.
That's another day.
Okay, fair enough.
Next trip.
July 21st.
All right, well, thank you both for coming and sharing your thoughts. That'll end the meeting, and we're gonna have a short deliberative session just here.